Okay, let's unpack this. I want you to imagine, just for a second, that you are standing on the absolute precipice of everything you think you know about reality.
Hmm.
You aren't a mystic. You aren't a spiritual seeker burning sage in your living room.
Not at all.
You are a man of hard, cold science. You've spent decades staring into the gray matter of the human brain,
Mm.
mapping its geography, fixing its broken circuits, and telling grieving families that death is the end.
Because that's what the science says, right? I mean, if you are a materialist, which most neurosurgeons are just
Yeah.
by training, you know that consciousness, that feeling of being you, is essentially just electricity and chemistry.
It's just neurons firing.
Exactly. Firing in a biological machine, it's a byproduct, like the hum of a refrigerator.
Exactly. The hum doesn't exist without the fridge. And then, one day, the machine breaks.
Right.
And I don't mean it gets a little glitchy. I mean it shuts down completely. The fridge is unplugged, smashed, and thrown in a dumpster. But the hum,
The hum gets louder.
it turns into a symphony.
It is the ultimate paradox, and it's the central hook of the story we are diving into today. We are looking at a case that challenges the very foundation of materialist science from the inside out.
We are diving deep into Dr. Eben Alexander's Proof of Heaven.
Mm.
And look, I know what you're probably thinking. I know the title sounds like something you'd find in the New Age section of a bookstore.
Right next to stories about guardian angels finding lost car keys.
Yeah, exactly. I was skeptical too. But this deep dive is different because the source material is different. We aren't talking about a guru here.
No, and that is absolutely crucial to the weight of this account. If you want to understand why this book caused such a massive cultural earthquake when it came out in 2012, you have to look at the author.
Van himself.
Dr. Eben Alexander wasn't just a doctor, he was a heavyweight. We're talking about an academic neurosurgeon with decades of experience at institutions like Duke and Harvard Medical School. This is someone who operated on brains for a living.
He was the guy who literally wrote textbook chapters on how the brain works. His entire professional identity was built on this one premise. The brain generates the mind.
That's the production model.
Right. So if you destroy the brain, you destroy the person. End of story.
Right. He admits in the text that before his experience, he was a rigid materialist. If a patient came to him and said they saw a white light or a dead relative during a cardiac arrest, he would have, patted them on the hand.
Very kindly, I'm sure.
Oh, absolutely. But he would have told them that was just your brain chemistry firing off as it ran out of oxygen. He categorized NDE's near-death experiences as hallucinations, wishful thinking.
So for you listening, it is crucial to keep this in mind. Eben Alexander was not looking for a spiritual experience. He was the guy who would have diagnosed it as a brain malfunction. He was firmly on Team Skeptic.
Which is why the mission of this deep dive is so specific. We aren't just telling a ghost story today.
What?
We are unpacking a medical and a narrative argument. Alexander claims his experience constitutes evidence, scientific evidence, specifically because of the way his brain was damaged.
The famous N of 1 case. A single data point so extreme it challenges the entire model.
We'll get to the medical grit because it is gnarly.
It really is.
But the stakes here are huge. We're basically touching on what philosophers call the hard problem of consciousness. Is the mind made by the brain, or does the brain just, pick up the signal of the mind like an antenna?
A receiver.
Precisely. And the roadmap Alexander provides is fascinating. We're going to track his journey from the total collapse of his body through this terrifying realm he calls the earthworm's eye view.
Which is just the most horrifying name.
What up into an ecstatic gateway, and then finally to the core of the universe itself.
But, and I want to promise you this, we're going to ground all of this in the medical details he provides. We're going to talk about the pus in the spinal fluid, the flatline cortex, and the statistical anomalies, because that's where the argument lives or dies.
It's a journey from a hospital bed in Lynchburg, Virginia, to the center of existence and back again. But interestingly, Alexander doesn't start the story in the hospital.
No, he doesn't. He starts it by jumping out of an airplane.
Which is a perfect place to start. This is our first section, the materialist and the skydive.
Yeah, I loved this opening. It's 1975, he's at the University of North Carolina, and he's part of a skydiving formation team. Young guy, full of confidence.
So, picture this. He's young, he's adventurous, they're doing a formation jump. It's chaotic up there. The wind is just roaring, gravity's pulling them down at 120 miles per hour.
Full sensory overload.
And suddenly he realizes he's on a collision course with another diver. It's a split-second life or death situation. Any hesitation and they both could die.
And this is where we see the pre-coma Eben Alexander in full force. Notice how he analyzes this memory in the book. He doesn't say, God saved me.
Nope.
He doesn't say, my guardian angel pushed me aside.
Not even close. He credits the hardware, the meat. He details the intricate split-second movements he had to make, a slight twist of the torso, an adjustment of his arm to manipulate his trajectory. He talks about the brain's extraordinary computational power.
He's basically bragging about his own biological computer. He's in awe of what the physical brain can do under pressure.
Exactly. He says the brain can process information faster than any supercomputer when survival is on the line. He uses this anecdote to establish his baseline respect for the biological organ. He wants the reader to know, I am a neurosurgeon, I love the brain, I know what it can do.
It's such a brilliant setup. It's almost like he's setting a trap for himself, rhetorically.
How do you mean?
He's saying, look, I know how powerful the brain is. I know it can create amazing illusions to save your life. I've experienced it. So when he tells us later that his brain couldn't have done what it did, we have to take him seriously. We can't just write it off.
That's the rhetorical strategy. Pre-2008, his worldview was that consciousness is just the feeling that happens alongside that electrochemical processing. He explicitly states that he believed NDEs were fantasies produced by brains under extreme stress.
He calls them chemical dumps.
Right.
Basically, the brain realizes it's dying, it panics, and it dumps a bunch of feel-good chemicals and hallucinogens, endorphins, DMT maybe, into the system to ease the transition.
A final fireworks show before the eternal darkness. A comforting delusion. That was his professional stance. He wasn't a hostile atheist, but he was a firm materialist. He didn't believe in the soul as something separate from the neurons.
So let's fast forward. We go from 1975 to November 10th, 2008. He's not a kid skydiving anymore.
No, it's 54 years old.
He's an established doctor. He's at the absolute top of his game, and then the skeptic crashes.
And this brings us to section 2, the medical crash. And crash is absolutely the right word. It starts innocuously enough. He wakes up with back pain.
Which, honestly, is how half of my bad days start. He thinks it's a muscle spasm from raking leaves. He ignores it.
He's a doctor. He knows how to compartmentalize pain. But it doesn't go away. It migrates. It intensifies. It turns into this splitting headache that he describes as if someone is taking a sledgehammer to his skull from the inside.
And here's a detail I found so human and so tragic. He tries to take a warm bath.
Yeah. His brain is literally under attack by bacteria. He's on the verge of a coma, and he's trying to soak it off.
It's that psychological denial, isn't it? Especially among doctors.
Oh, for sure. Physician, heal thyself. It's hard to admit you're the patient. He spent his life diagnosing other people. He couldn't conceive that he was the one in the middle of a catastrophic pathology. But the denial couldn't last. The pain becomes blinding. He collapses.
His wife, Holly, eventually finds him. He's rigid. He's non-responsive. He's having a grand mal seizure.
And just like that, the lights go out in the physical world. He's rushed to Lynchburg General Hospital, which ironically is where he worked.
Oh, wow. Can you imagine that scene? The ER doctor, Dr. Laura Potter, seeing her colleague, this brilliant neurosurgeon, come in thrashing and delirious.
It must have been terrifying for everyone. But we need to slow down here because the diagnosis is the absolute key to everything that follows. They perform a lumbar puncture, a spinal tap to check his cerebrospinal fluid, or CSF.
Okay, for the non-doctors listening, what should that look like? Break that down.
In a healthy person, CSF is crystal clear. It looks like water. It's the fluid that bathes and protects the brain and spinal cord.
Okay.
When they tapped Dr. Alexander's spine, the fluid wasn't clear. It was, and I quote directly from the medical records, full of pus.
Ugh, that is such a visceral image.
Yeah.
Full of pus. That means a massive infection.
Massive. The diagnosis was bacterial meningitis. But not just any meningitis. It was E. coli, bacterial meningitis.
E. coli, isn't that the stuff you get from, like, bad lettuce or undercooked hamburgers?
It is common in the gut, yes.
And
but for it to spontaneously breach the blood-brain barrier and attack the brain of a healthy adult who hasn't had head trauma or recent surgery, that is incredibly, vanishingly rare.
How rare are we talking?
Alexander cites the statistics in the book. It's less than 1 in 10 million for a spontaneous case in an adult. It's a statistical anomaly. A lightning strike.
Okay, but why is the type of bacteria so important? Why does it matter that it was E. coli?
Because the specific nature of this bacteria is the cornerstone of his entire argument. This is what we have to call the cortex argument.
Okay, lay this out for me.
So, E. coli bacteria are aggressive consumers of glucose. Your brain runs entirely on glucose. It's the fuel. The bacteria were essentially eating his brain's fuel source,
So they were starving his brain cells to death.
starving them. On top of that, your immune system fights back, which creates massive inflammation and, well, pus. The very thing they found in his spinal fluid.
So his brain is starving and swelling at the same time. A perfect storm.
Exactly. And the cortex, the neocortex, that's the rind, or the outer layer of the brain, it's the part pressed right up against the skull. When the brain swells, the cortex gets crushed. It bears the brunt of the attack.
And the cortex is the important part, right? The thinking part.
It's the human part. The neocortex handles everything: sensory perception, language, memory, higher order thinking, logic, visual processing. It is the screen upon which the movie of your conscious life plays.
So in Alexander's case, the bacteria were eating the power cord and the swelling was smashing the screen.
That is a perfect analogy. Alexander argues that his cortex was, quote, stunned to complete inactivity. His medical records show that his glucose levels in the CSF were at 1 milligram per deciliter. Normal is 60 to 80.
So basically zero. No fuel.
Medically speaking, his brain shouldn't have been able to produce a dream, let alone a complex, structured hallucination.
Right, because a dream is brain activity. A hallucination is the cortex firing wildly.
Yeah.
You need the machine to be on.
Exactly. If you smash your television screen with a baseball bat, you don't get a clearer, high-definition picture of the Super Bowl.
No, you get static. You get nothing.
But Alexander didn't get static. He got the most vivid, complex, structured, and meaningful experience of his entire existence.
And that is the central paradox. If the machine that generates the mind is broken beyond repair, where did the mind go?
Yeah.
And what was it experiencing?
So let's follow him there. He's out cold in the hospital. The doctors are panicked. He's on a ventilator. His family is gathered. But where is he?
Where's his consciousness?
This brings us to section 3, the descent. And this is where the story defies all the typical NDE expectations.
Yeah, you expect a near-death experience to be instant bliss, floating above the body, seeing the doctors working, maybe a tunnel of light.
The classic grandpa is waving at me from the garden moment.
Right, but he doesn't get that. Not even close.
No. He wakes up, for lack of a better word, in what he calls the earthworm's eye view.
Which is such a horrifying name. Paint the picture for us. What was this place?
He describes a visible darkness. He feels like he is submerged in something muddy, a gelatinous, murky substance. He's restricted. He can't move freely.
It sounds claustrophobic.
Very. And he looks up and sees what he describes as roots or blood vessels snaking overhead, as if he is underground or maybe inside some giant, grotesque biological wound.
Like being buried alive in wet concrete.
It's worse because he has no memory. And this is so crucial to understand. He's not Dr. Eben Alexander, the neurosurgeon who was trapped in mud. He is just a point of awareness. He has no identity.
He doesn't know what a human is.
Doesn't know what Earth is. He has no language, no concepts, no past, no future. It's just this raw, terrifying present moment.
He calls it the grotesque realm. He talks about the smell, feces, and blood. And the visuals. He sees these animalistic faces bubbling out of the muck around him.
Yeah, he says they would screech and groan and then sink back in. It sounds like a scene from Hieronymus Bosch or Dante's Inferno.
Truly hellish. And there's a sound, right?
Oh,
a constant sound.
Yes, a constant mechanical pounding. Thump, thump, thump. Like a distant metallic industrial heart.
That is terrifying. Just that alone. Do we have any idea what that sound was? Does he speculate?
He does, retrospectively. He speculates that it might have been his consciousness perceiving his own heartbeat, or perhaps the rhythmic whoosh of the mechanical ventilator that was pumping air into his lungs in the ICU.
So real physical sound.
But because his cortex, the part of the brain that would say, oh, that's a ventilator, was offline, he experienced it as this raw, terrifying industrial noise. It was pure sensation without interpretation.
I want to push back on this a bit, playing devil's advocate for a second.
Please.
If his cortex was offline, how is he remembering the smell of feces or the look of the faces? Doesn't creating and storing a memory require the brain?
That is the million-dollar question, and it's the one skeptics latch onto. They would say, he fabricated these memories while he was waking up during that period of ICU psychosis, a reboot phenomenon.
So his brain was coming back online and just created a story to fill in the blank week.
Right. But Alexander argues that the sheer visceral intensity of it, the complexity, and the fact that it felt more real than his life on Earth suggests that memory isn't purely stored in the brain's tissue.
So what's the alternative?
He argues that he was experiencing this with his soul or his non-local consciousness, which records everything, even when the brain is down. The brain is the usual recorder, but when the recorder breaks, the live feed is still happening somewhere else.
Okay, I get the argument.
And structurally, in his narrative, this subhuman existence is important. It represents consciousness completely disconnected from the divine. It is what happens when you are just a point of view without the context of love or higher intelligence. It's a very solitary, very primitive state of being.
So he's trapped in this mud, hearing this metallic pounding, totally amnesiac. How long was he there? Does he have any sense of time?
Time didn't exist for him in the same way we experience it, but he says it felt like an eternity. He was trapped. There was no escape.
So how does he get out? Does he fight his way out?
No, he couldn't. He didn't even know there was an out to fight for. Rescue came from outside of him. This moves us to section 4, the ascent.
The spinning melody. I love this image. It's such a shift.
In this dark, muddy, smelly place, a light appears above him. But it's not just a light, it's a sound. He calls it a living sound.
Not just hearing it, but feeling it.
Exactly. And as it gets closer, he realizes it's a melody, a complex, beautiful piece of music. It spins and radiates these fine filaments of white gold light that cut through the darkness.
And this spinning melody acts like a rope or a portal.
It acts as a portal. He feels himself being pulled up by it, drawn toward the sound and the light, the mud, the darkness, the screeching faces. They all just fall away. He breaks through the membrane of the muck.
And emerges into what he calls the Gateway Valley.
Yes.
And talk about a contrast. I mean, we go from feces and blood to what he calls the ultra-real.
That concept of ultra-real is vital to his argument. He insists over and over that this was not dreamlike. You know how in a dream things are shifty? You try to read a sign and the words change?
Yeah, or the geography doesn't make sense. The edges are blurry.
He says this was the opposite. It was sharper, more vibrant, more saturated, and more substantial than the world we are living in right now.
Wow. He claims that coming back to Earth felt like going into a dream. That world, the gateway, was the solid one. This one is the shadow.
He describes lush greenery, waterfalls flowing into crystal pools. And it's not empty. He sees thousands of people. Or beings.
Beings, yeah. They're dancing. There's a festive atmosphere. It sounds like a cosmic party, this incredible celebration of life.
But he isn't walking among them. He is flying.
He is flying.
On the wing of a giant butterfly.
Yes. Surrounded by millions of other butterflies.
Okay, I have to pause here. A giant butterfly. If I'm a skeptic listening to this, I'm rolling my eyes right now. It sounds like a Disney movie. It sounds like a fantasy.
It does sound fantastical, and he knows it. But Alexander argues that the imagery, the butterfly, the valley, was just how his consciousness translated a nonverbal, divine energy. It was a metaphor he could understand.
A user interface for the divine.
That's a great way to put it. His soul's UI. And he wasn't alone on that wing. This is where the story gets incredibly personal.
This is the character we need to talk about. The guide. He describes a beautiful girl accompanying him on the butterfly wing. She has high cheekbones, deep blue eyes, golden brown hair, and she's wearing a simple peasant dress. The description is very specific.
And she gives him a message. But she doesn't speak, right? It's not auditory, it's telepathic.
Correct. He calls it a conceptual transfer. It hits him all at once, not in words, but in pure meaning. And the message is threefold. If you take nothing else from Alexander's theological argument, take this.
Okay, what was it?
The message was, 1, you are loved and cherished dearly forever.
Wow.
2, you have nothing to fear.
Okay.
And 3, there is nothing you can do wrong.
There is nothing you can do wrong. That is a bold statement. I feel like that needs a giant asterisk next to it.
It definitely sounds risky, doesn't it?
I mean, if I tell my teenage son there's nothing you can do wrong, he's going to take the car and drive it into a swimming pool. Does Alexander explain this? Is it a license to sin?
He clarifies this extensively later in the book. It is not a license for anarchy or immorality. It is an ontological statement about the nature of the soul.
Okay, what does that mean?
It means that in the grand scheme of the divine order, your soul is safe. You cannot accidentally damn yourself. You are held within a system of love that is bigger than your mistakes. It's an affirmation of ultimate safety, not a negation of earthly morality. It means you don't have to live in constant anxiety about messing up your eternal fate.
So it's not saying go be a terrible person. It's saying even when you fail, you are still held in love.
Precisely. It's a universe defined by unconditional acceptance, not by judgment.
That's a huge shift from the fire and brimstone version of the afterlife a lot of us grew up with.
Completely. And it was a message he received while flying on a butterfly, feeling this immense unconditional love.
So he's in this Gateway Valley. Does he stay there? Is this heaven?
No, this is just the gateway. The journey goes deeper. He moves beyond the gateway, beyond all form and imagery, into what he calls the core. This is section 5.
The core. This sounds intense. He describes leaving the visual world behind completely.
He enters an infinite inky blackness, but he's very clear that it's a paradoxical blackness. He calls it a blackness that is brimming over with light.
That sounds like a contradiction. How can something be dark and full of light?
It is, but mystics have described this for centuries. The dazzling darkness, or the dark night of the soul, which is actually a state of union. It's not the scary, empty darkness of the earthworm's eye view. It's a pregnant darkness, a womb, the source of all potential.
And this is where he meets the, well, what does he call it? God, the creator.
He hesitates to use the word God because it comes with so much human baggage and preconceived notions. He refers to this presence as Om.
Om. Like the meditation chant, A-U-M.
Exactly. He chose that name because of the sound. He says a resonant vibration permeated the entire space. It was the sound of the universe itself vibrating with existence. And in the presence of Om, the communication changed again. In the gateway, he had a guide who gave him a message. In the core, he had instantaneous information transfer.
Like a direct download into his consciousness. No middleman.
Questions were answered before he could even finish asking them. The moment a question formed in his awareness, the answer was already there, complete and profound. He claims he learned about the structure of the universe, the multidimensional nature of reality. He even tackles the problem of evil.
Yeah, the age-old question. If Om is all-loving and all-powerful, why did Alexander have to suffer in the mud? Why do bad things happen to good people? What did he learn?
He was taught that evil is necessary. It provides the friction required for free will and for the growth of the soul. You can't choose the light if there is no darkness to contrast it with. If everything is perfect and blissful, there is no evolution, no choice, no growth.
So evil is like resistance training for the soul. It's the weight you lift to get stronger.
That's a very good way of putting it. But, and this is the key part, he says that from the perspective of the core, evil is vanishingly small. It's like a single grain of sand on a vast, infinite beach of love.
It feels huge to us here, though.
It feels huge to us because we are rubbing our faces in that one grain of sand. We're immersed in it. But from the higher perspective, it's an insignificant, temporary part of a much larger, loving whole.
That's a comforting thought, though definitely hard to swallow when you're in the middle of a tragedy.
Absolutely. Alexander acknowledges that. But he insists that the fundamental fabric of the universe is love. Not an emotion, but a substance, a force of physics.
So he cycled through these realms. He went from the mud to the gateway to the core and back.
Yes, he describes being pulled back down into the earthworm's eye view several times, only to be rescued again by the spinning melody, which acted as a key or a portal. He also mentions a place called the Well as a sort of transitional resting place between these main realms.
So while he's having this cosmic tour of the universe, this incredibly profound spiritual journey, we have to remember the split screen here. His physical body is lying in a hospital bed in Virginia looking like death.
Let's switch gears to section 6, the anchors. Because the reality in Lynchburg was grim, it was getting worse, not better.
It was a nightmare scenario for his family. His body was deteriorating. The powerful antibiotics they were using weren't working. His brain swelling was massive. He looked like a corpse. The doctors were gently preparing the family for the worst.
They were discussing when to pull the plug, when to let him go, but the family, especially his wife and sisters, refused to give up.
I found the family pact really touching. His sister Phyllis decided that someone had to be holding his hand at all times, 254/7. They created a roster so he was never physically alone.
And Alexander argues retrospectively that these tactile connections were spiritual anchors. He believes that without that physical touch, that human connection tethering him to his body, his soul might have just drifted off permanently into the core. He needed a rope to climb back down.
And there's a specific moment that stands out. With his son, Bond. Bond was only 10 years old at the time. Can you imagine that trauma for a child?
It's awful to think about. It happened on Wednesday, the 3rd day of the coma. The family decided Bond should see his father. Alexander is hooked up to ventilators, monitors, tubes everywhere. It's a scary sight for anyone, let alone a 10-year-old.
But Bond doesn't shrink back. He runs up, pulls his father's eyelids open, which reveals eyes just rolling back in his head, and he shouts, "You're going to be okay, Daddy."
And Alexander claims he felt that. He perceived it somehow.
This is fascinating. He claims that even though his cortex was offline, he couldn't hear the sound waves, he couldn't process the language, he perceived Bond's presence.
How? How does he describe it?
He describes it as a beam of love penetrating the darkness of the Earthworm's eye view. He says the purity of his son's love cut right through the muck and the screeching faces. It reached him when nothing else could.
That implies that love isn't just a chemical reaction in the brain. It implies love is a signal, like a radio wave that can bypass the broken receiver and go straight to the source.
That is precisely Alexander's argument. Love is physics. It's a fundamental force of the universe, like gravity. And it was that beam that helped orient him, that reminded him of a world to return to.
But despite that beam, the medical situation hit rock bottom. By day 7, that Sunday, the doctors advised ending life support. There was no hope left from a medical perspective.
Sunday morning, the end of the line. The family is in the conference room, crying, trying to make an impossible decision, and then the weather gets involved.
It's a cinematic detail, but he swears by it, and his family confirms it. There had been a huge storm raging all weekend, but just as the doctors were conferring with the family about stopping treatment, the storm broke, the sun came out, and a perfect double rainbow appeared right outside the hospital window.
Of course. A rainbow. It sounds too perfect, like something from a movie.
It does. But his family took it as a sign, a synchronization, a little wink from the universe. They decided to hold on just a little longer, and as it turns out, that was the moment things began to shift.
Which leads us to Section 7, the return. The party in the afterlife is ending.
The portals began to close. Alexander describes a sense of heaviness, of finality. The spinning melody faded. He was descending back to the underworld, back to the muck, one last time.
But it was different this time, right? The feeling was different.
Yes. Because now he knew. He knew the muck wasn't the end. He knew he was loved. He had the memory of the gateway and the core. He wasn't afraid anymore.
And then he sees the faces again. But not the grotesque, animalistic faces from before.
No. This time he sees 6 distinct human faces emerging from the muck, looking at him with concern and love. At the time, in his amnesiac state, he didn't know who they were. But later, after he woke up, he identified them as the specific people who were standing around his hospital bed during those final 24 hours.
His family, his friends, the pastor.
Exactly. This is what he calls veridical time anchors. He's arguing, I saw you. I saw your face. My physical eyes were closed. My brain was off, but I saw you.
He's claiming he was observing physical reality through non-physical means.
Correct. And then, the awakening. Bond, his son, rushes into the room again. This is the moment. And as he's pleading with his dad, a young resident against all protocol tries to jam a breathing tube down Alexander's throat. The pain stimulus is immense, and Alexander wakes up.
And his first words weren't, I saw God, or where am I?
No. He opened his eyes, looked at the people around him, and said, thank you. And then, a little later, all is well.
All is well. Talk about a change in perspective. From a man who would have said, you are dying of an incurable meningitis, to all is well.
But the recovery wasn't instant. He didn't just hop out of bed and write a bestseller. This part is really important for his credibility.
No, and this is a part of the story I think gives him a lot of credibility. He freely admits to having ICU psychosis after he woke up.
This is a crucial distinction he makes. ICU psychosis is very common. The brain is rebooting, it's flooded with drugs, it's misfiring, it's confused. Alexander describes having paranoid hallucinations in the days after waking up.
What kind of hallucinations? Were they like his NDE?
Not at all. They were standard crazy stuff.
Yeah.
He thought his wife was a conspirator trying to kill him. He thought there were Russian spies in the hospital. He hallucinated a ninja running across the ceiling.
Ninjas and Russian spies. That's like a bad action movie from the 80s.
Exactly. And Alexander uses this to his advantage. He says, look, I know what a hallucination feels like. I had them for days. They were paranoid, disordered, nonsensical, and they faded in and out.
And he contrasts that with the NDE?
Yes. He says the NDE was hyper-ordered, it was structured, it was meaningful, it was ultra-real. It didn't fade like a dream. It stayed with him like a solid, unshakable memory. He uses the craziness of his recovery to highlight the clarity and coherence of the coma experience.
That's a really smart argument. He's essentially saying, I have a control group for altered states of consciousness. I have a data set, my own brain on drugs versus my soul on a journey.
Another crucial point in his return is what he calls the gift of forgetting.
Right, the tabula rasa, the blank slate.
Yeah.
We mentioned this earlier, that during the NDE, he didn't know he was a neurosurgeon. Why does he think that was a gift?
Imagine if he had gone into that experience with his earthly identity intact. He would have been Dr. Eben Alexander, the skeptic. He would have spent the entire time analyzing the butterfly wing, trying to figure out the neurochemistry of the sound.
He'd be taking notes.
He would have been observing, not experiencing. He would have been too busy thinking to just...
He would have analyzed the experience away before it even happened.
Exactly. By being wiped clean, by losing his memory, he was able to receive the message purely. He became a perfect vessel because he was empty. The skeptical filter was removed.
So he recovers. Miraculously, by the way. The medical side of this is staggering.
And that is Section 8, the evidence. We cannot overstate how medically impossible his recovery was.
He cites his treating physician, Dr. Scott Wade, in Appendix A of the book.
And the argument is simple. A week-long E. coli meningitis infection with that much pus, that much inflammation, and a week-long coma. Usually, if you survive, you are in a persistent vegetative state. Your brain is Swiss cheese. The damage is catastrophic and permanent.
You don't go back to performing brain surgery or writing best-selling books.
No. The fact that he returned with his cognitive faculties completely intact, that his memory came back, his language came back, is, in his view, a miracle. It suggests that his mind wasn't stored in the damaged tissue. The files weren't on the broken hard drive.
And this leads him to propose a new theory of consciousness. Or rather, to revive an old one that has been on the fringes of science for a century.
The filter theory. We need to spend a minute on this because this is the scientific payload of the deep dive.
Right. The standard view, the one Alexander himself held before his coma, is the production theory. The brain produces consciousness, like a turbine produces electricity, or a gland produces bile. No turbine, no electricity.
Simple. Cause and effect. Materialism 101.
But Alexander shifts to the transmission theory, which was championed by people like psychologist William James and author Aldous Huxley. The idea is that the brain doesn't create consciousness, it filters it.
Explain that. What does that mean?
Imagine consciousness as like a massive cloud of data, or a radio signal that contains every station, every song, every sound in the universe all at once. It's overwhelming. It's cosmic consciousness.
Okay, I'm with you.
If you had that in your head all the time, you couldn't tie your shoes, you couldn't drive to work, you'd be paralyzed by awe and information overload.
So the brain is a restrictor plate, an attenuator.
Exactly. Huxley called it a reducing valve. Its primary job is to block out 99.9% of that universal consciousness so that we can focus on survival. Eat, sleep, reproduce. Avoid the tiger in the bushes. It dumbs us down to make us functional in this physical reality.
So when his brain broke due to the meningitis...
The filter was destroyed, the valve broke open, and instead of the signal stopping, the floodgates opened. The ocean of consciousness flooded in.
That flips the whole medical argument on its head. The damage didn't cause the hallucination, the damage allowed the reality to come through.
Precisely. The brain wasn't the projector, it was the blindfold. And the meningitis ripped the blindfold off.
But skeptics have other explanations, right? I mean, we touched on them, but it's worth going through his refutations. I've heard about DMT a lot in this context.
He addresses these one by one in Appendix B of the book. Take the DMT argument. The theory is that the pineal gland dumps DMT, a potent psychedelic when you die. Skeptics say he just had a massive DMT trip.
Why does he reject that?
Because DMT, like any chemical, requires a functioning neocortex with active receptors to process the visuals. You need a screen to watch the movie. Alexander's argument always comes back to the state of his cortex. My screen was smashed. Even if there was DMT, there was no machinery to display the trip.
Okay. What about the reboot phenomenon we mentioned earlier? The idea he made it all up as he was waking up.
He argues the experience was too long, too structured, and too coherent. It wasn't a quick flash of images on waking. It had a narrative arc. A descent, an ascent, the climax and the core. It felt like it lasted for ages, not seconds.
And the brainstem. I've heard some argue it could be a primitive brainstem program, a sort of evolutionary play-dead mechanism.
He says it's far too complex for that. The brainstem handles basic survival functions. It doesn't compose symphonies, create ultra-real landscapes, or deliver profound telepathic messages about the nature of love. Okay, I get the logic. He has an answer for the main scientific critiques, but logic only goes so far. There is one piece of evidence in the book that isn't about glucose or pus or brain stems. It's emotional, it's personal, and honestly, it's the Chekhov's gun of the entire story.
The photograph. Yes, this is the climax.
We have to rewind a bit to set this up. Alexander was adopted. He mentions this early in the book.
Right. He grew up in a loving adoptive family, but like many adopted children, he had questions about his biological origins. He eventually reconnected with his birth family in 2007, just a year before the coma.
But there was a tragedy in that story. He learned that he had a biological sister named Kathy, but she had died tragically in 1998.
He never met her, he never spoke to her, and this is the crucial detail, he never saw a picture of her. She was a ghost to him, a name on a family tree that he felt a sad connection to but had no face for.
Okay, so fast forward to the NDE. He's on the butterfly wing. He's with this beautiful girl with the high cheekbones and the deep blue eyes. He feels an immense unconditional love for her and from her, but he doesn't recognize her.
To him, she was a guardian angel, a beautiful stranger sent to guide him.
Now, if this was a hallucination created by his own brain to comfort him, who would he logically see?
He would see his wife, Holly. He would see his son, Bond, or maybe his deceased adoptive father, whom he loved dearly and missed terribly.
That's the wish fulfillment theory. You see what you want to see. Your brain projects familiar, comforting faces.
Exactly. You don't hallucinate a total stranger to guide you into the afterlife. It makes no psychological sense.
So 4 months after the coma, he's back home, he's recovering, he gets an envelope in the mail from his biological sister, the one who's still alive.
It contains some old family photos.
And in that stack of photos is a picture of Kathy, the sister he never knew, the sister who died years before.
Yeah.
He opens the envelope, he shuffles through the pictures, he gets to one of them, and he freezes.
It was her.
It was the girl on the butterfly wing. The specific features, the eyes, the cheekbones, the smile. He said it matched perfectly. It was an instant, gut-level recognition.
That is the mic drop moment.
It really is.
For Alexander, it was the final, irrefutable proof. He argues this completely rules out wish fulfillment. He couldn't have projected her face because he didn't know what her face looked like. There was no memory trace in his brain to access.
So he met a dead relative he didn't know he had in a place that shouldn't exist, using a brain that wasn't working.
That is the summary of the case for proof of heaven. He believes it confirms that the soul survives death, and that we are reunited with our loved ones, even the ones we never got to know on Earth.
So what does this all mean? We've got a Harvard-trained neurosurgeon who went to the brink, saw the other side, and came back with a message of love and a photograph to prove it. What do we do with that?
This leads us to our outro, the transformation. Alexander shifted from the skeptics' camp to the believers' camp, but he says there is a third camp, and that's who he really wants to reach.
The seekers.
The people who are open to evidence but haven't made up their minds. The people who have an intuition that there is more to reality but need a logical or scientific bridge. He wants to validate that intuition. He wants to bring science and spirituality back together, arguing they are just two different maps of the same territory.
And he leaves us with that concept of the ultra-real. It's so powerful.
It's the flatland analogy from the book by Edwin Abbott. Imagine we are 2D stick figures living on a piece of paper. We can only see left, right, forward, backward. We can't even conceive of the concept of up.
It's not in our vocabulary.
And then a 3D being, like a sphere, passes through our paper world. We just see a circle that appears, grows, shrinks, and vanishes. We couldn't comprehend the whole sphere, Alexander is saying. Earthly life is the paper. The afterlife is the 3D room. He was lifted off the page for a week and saw the bigger reality.
And the message he brought back isn't just about what happens when you die. It's about how to live here, on the page.
Exactly. If you truly deeply believe the message, you are loved, you have nothing to fear, you can do no wrong, how does that change your Tuesday morning commute? How does it change how you treat your neighbor or yourself? It shifts the entire operating system of your life from fear to love.
That is the ultimate takeaway. And here is a final thought for you to chew on as you go about your day. If Alexander is right and your brain is just a filter, what are you filtering out right now?
That's the question.
What incredible, terrifying, beautiful things are happening right in front of your face, swirling around you in this room, but your brain is politely hiding them from you, just so you can focus on driving your car or making your coffee.
And what happens when that filter, which is designed to fail, inevitably dissolves?
I guess we'll all find out eventually. Thanks for diving deep with us.
Until next time.